Morning, everybody. Bobby Moore here, and I'm excited to be talking to Mike McDermott from CEO of FreshBooks. Morning, Mike. How are you?
Good morning, Bobby. Thanks for having me.
Delighted to have you here today, and it's actually exciting because the Power Connection broadcast. We kind of took a bit of hiatus in the summer because hey, I needed my vacation time. So I'm glad to be back and doing some great interviews with people. Today I'm talking to Mike. On Wednesday I'm talking to Floyd Marinescu, who's the CEO of UBI, which is all about universal basic income. So that's going to be a great conversation as well. And today we're going to talk about creating, growing, sustaining a strong culture while you're scaling your business, which Mike can tell us all about that because he's had some great success with that. And I'm looking forward to having that conversation. In the meantime, if you are joining us, again, the way to join us and have fun and make the most of it is we want to engage you. So comment below, let us know where you're from, where you're calling in from, North America, South America, Asia, Europe, Africa, Australia. Let us know if you have questions for Mike about the topic or anything else you want to ask him, because he's got a lot of knowledge, a lot of experience, and so I think you want to make the most of that opportunity as well. And feel free to share the love with all the likes, the hearts, and all that kind of stuff. And if you want to bring people conversation, tag them in, share it on your own page. Let's build the conversation. All right, but let's start off, Mike. I think we'll start off normally as we always do with the Power Connection broadcast, which, by the way, I should mention is every Monday and Wednesday in the morning around 8:45, 9 a.m. And why don't we start off with what you telling us a bit about your story, which I think is a fantastic story and a great Canadian story, and we'll go from there.
All right. Thanks, Bobby. So
Yeah.
my story goes something like this. I'm sort of thoroughly unemployable, and I started a business out of school. And in fourth year, I left the program I was in, started two businesses, and one of them turned into an events business. Started teaching myself how to build websites. Caterer needed a website for that business, and I started building websites for other people. This is around like 2000. One fine day running that business, I accidentally saved over an invoice and said, "There's got to be a better way to do this." I had been running my books with Word and Excel, and found there were just real shortcomings in that way of doing things. At the same time, despite having some bookkeeping knowledge, I really did not want to go and use the accounting software that was available at the time. So I built a simple service online to bill my clients, and turned out they really liked it. And so we started thinking about who else might want this, and that started me on a journey from having never really worked anywhere else, had built a services firm, to trying to build a product company. And I'll tell you, it's a very different ballgame with not that it's easy to build a large services firm, but it feels like there's a lot more variables at play in a product company. And so we started that out, and ended up, as the story goes, the true story, moving into my parents' basement for about 3.5 years.
Wow.
Getting the ground. We had we sort of crossed the 1,000 customer threshold when we were in the basement, and beyond that, and then ended up moving out. We had 6 people showing up every day for work, including myself.
In your parents' basement, or no, somewhere else?
No, my parents' basement. and then we sort of FreshBooker number 7, I should say, got us to a new place. Anyways, since then, we've raised, probably the simplest way to think about it is on the order of like $100 million, but actually, interestingly too, and I don't know if I have questions around this. Waited 10 years to start raising venture capital, so didn't do that at the outset. Wanted to get to a size and scale where we thought everyone would be successful, and now we're scaling capital, kind of like a pre-IPO company. Number 2 in America for small business accounting software. About 400 plus employees, kind of hiring rapidly, based in Toronto and Amsterdam and Raleigh and Croatia now, Zagreb as well. So it's it's been a lot of fun, and there's still more work to do ahead than there is behind. So that gives me something to get up for in the morning.
That's awesome.
One more thing I should say.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's great. And one of the things I'm curious about is, was there a point? Where was the point where you knew that you had something, and okay, this is we're gonna make it. I think we can do this.
There's been various points depending on various decisions, but the example that I most often go to when I hear that question has to do with customers, right? So when was it that you felt that you had a product that other people might want to buy? And it goes to the basement. and everyone was working in one room, and I used to sort of saunter off into the furnace room in my parents' home to handle phone calls on like a wireless phone, and I couldn't even stand in that room, so I'm crouched over, and I was asking this one customer, I was doing research and asking them like, well, why did you choose FreshBooks, and and what do you think there's any benefits? And it was an open-ended question. What benefits have you found from the service? And
Right.
this individual wanted to tell me, well, listen, it's so easy and fast to use that I actually create my invoices as I go, and I don't put it off to the end of the month. And because of that, I actually end up billing more because I don't forget about things that I did, and I get paid a lot faster. And I was like, well, that was it. That was the moment I really knew, and that was not at the start, but that I think was when the conviction became sort of steel, and really knew that we had something to build on.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And so now, I mean, and since a lot of your work is online software, I mean, I assume that things are going well even through COVID. How's that going for you in terms of the transition through COVID? But also, I mean, obviously, probably business is okay because it's online. But then, how are the employees doing? How's your team doing? And how are you doing?
Yeah. Okay. So there's 3 buckets there. There's the customer, the team, and self. So let's work through those. So our customers, there's such great fear and uncertainty at the outset, and so I in a roundabout way had the good fortune to have lived through 2008, and by virtue of that, we saw how people behaved in that financial crisis, and it would seem with our business, when that happens, people get worried, right, at the outset, and they go, and in our case, we are like a monthly subscription service, and so people will go ahead and say, hey, if I'm not using the service, I'm going to go ahead and cancel it. And so you see a little runoff of people leaving, but and it always looks awful sort of for 1 month. And then it's like that all gets behind us, and we've been actually growing at an increasing rate, and putting up some of our best numbers, frankly, the past quarter or so. So it was very scary. And just candidly speaking, we actually elected to we built in scenarios like this, you want to plan for the worst and hope for the best. And so we built that plan, and it was pretty not an relatively exciting plan, but it was a plan where we were the business was going to be going for a long time, and under our own control, and anyhow, long story short, we sort of went through that for sort of 8-10 weeks, and then have been sort of growing since then, and and I don't know how much of it is just the regular course of business, or people's attitudes and orientations around, I'm going to get on this self-employment thing or what have you. It's honestly hard to detect at this point in time, but
or it could be an attitude towards embracing the virtual, right, and using softwares and the technology and tools as well.
100%. So anyone who was hosting their documents in their office, like their accounting or something like that, forget it, right? You're moving to the cloud now. And so yes, if you're someone like that, please go check out freshbooks.com and get started for free. But that's another story. So that's that. So yes, we really do feel like we have good tailwinds there, and people adopting online, and it's still very early days for that effort. So that's good. And then with the I guess I was getting at the employee base, we actually, in that dark plan, we and I this is hurts my soul, but let's go ahead and talk about it. We did let some people go, and that was because we thought that was the responsible thing to do, to just make sure that the company was going to be going to be able to just survive basically anything. And then things started going well, and so we've started ramping up and hiring again. But inside all of that, and this is germane to culture, I guess, and perhaps more pertinent to the discussion we want to have today, is I've been amazed. We were really an office-based culture. We probably had 7 to 10 people who were full-time remote, of 400 plus, and we went to remote inside of 18 hours. Like, it was about 30 hours, I guess. People just we were remote 100%.
Wow.
in like 18 hours. Before we gave the company something like 100 hours in 18 ish, 1830. Everyone was there. And it's been very smooth. And so we'll talk about this, I'm sure, as we go, but that's just one of our culture and the way we built it and some of its qualities have, they were great in one sort of environment, and they've proven to be excellent in another as well as we've gone remote. So that's been great. And then just quickly on the self, father of three, sort of cooped up in COVID. My children are, sort of now 5, just had 3, and then about 7 months old. So,
oh my gosh, that's intense.
It's been really intense.
Yeah.
I wouldn't, and just kind of draining. So we, it's been nice to feel things relaxing. We're sort of live in Toronto, Canada, the past few weeks, and but I think I'm just trying to steel myself for and get geared up for hunkering down again, as it's most likely things, in my opinion, will lock down again later this fall.
Yeah, that's true. I think that right now we're enjoying a little bit more freedom right now, and I think that we should certainly take advantage of the next couple of months before things do start to potentially lock down as well. And I always talk about the kids too, because my kids are 9 and my son turned 12 yesterday, so happy birthday now. And it's it was hard for us because both of us work from home, and being an entrepreneur has been really difficult during this time because you have less time. But I also know parents with kids 5 and under like that. Yeah, I don't even know how you do that, because the kids require far more. I can put my kids, I can get them to do stuff on their own a little bit, but man, that's amazing that you were able to navigate that. So I'm glad you brought that up. So let's talk about culture. The topic today, again, for those of you joining in, we're talking to Mike McDerment, CEO of FreshBooks, the number 2 largest accounting software in North America. And we're going to talk about how to build and grow and sustain culture and as you scale and grow your business. I think it's an important piece because, I have a startup as well. And so the culture piece is something that's very, very important to me. So certainly add your questions if you have them for him. We have people already sending in. Leaf saying hello from Toronto, Moshe from Toronto, and Philly from Kampala. Okay, so we have a large number of people who are joining in. Now, let's talk about culture. I mean, when did you start actually addressing or realizing, okay, the culture is something I need to focus my attention on?
I think the thing that brought it together, intuitively, I think I was there. But I was listening to a podcast one day, interestingly, by, the CEO. I couldn't believe it in hindsight. Like it was this guy who ran a bank, Silicon Valley Bank. And I was listening to the Stanford Entrepreneurial Thought Leadership podcast series. I don't know if you've seen it, but these were some of the earliest ones. It basically just started. And I came away from it believing him. He's like, the only difference between us and everyone else is our culture. And I was like, I can't believe I believe you, but I do. And he just talked about the importance of culture and it being the only sort of difference maker. And so it kind of set me on this journey. I'd never worked anywhere. I didn't really understand workplace culture. I didn't know, what it was, and it was very nebulous. So it's been kind of a first principles all the way through trying to figure it out thing. And, if I were to sum up what culture is, I'd say it's what happens when no one's looking. Right. And I think that's a very important thing for you to concern yourself with if you're building a business or a company. How do people behave when no one's looking?
So in terms of actually setting the tone for the culture, what are some of the steps you would make in the early days to start, particularly as you're growing the business?
Well, I think a lot of the good things we did were fairly accidental, but also good. So, the number one thing we have done and continue to do is that everyone at FreshBooks spends their first month in customer support. And what that does is it does a number of things. So it's a month you're there, but you get a lot of training at the start. And the training is about our product. Okay. And then you're going to get on the phone and talk with our customers. And then you're going to, and it becomes non-academic who you're serving, why they need you, the importance of what we do, which kind of lends itself to this mission thing. But we also teach you during that time, at the start, like, hey, our values. And so part of, if you go on the journey towards culture, then, I strongly encourage you to get to go ahead and try and document your values. We can talk a bunch about that, but those are the sort of guardrails for behaviors in your organization, the ones you want to perpetuate. and they give you tools for, sort of having constructive conversations if necessary as well. But that's probably the biggest thing we did that month, because people sort of get enough time to really understand what we're about and who our customer is, and that sets them up to make good decisions for years to come.
And let's dive into the document your value. So tell me a bit about that process. What does that process entail, and how's it work?
Yeah. So what we did early days was I started becoming a student of culture and what have you, and that led to this conversation around values. And so we said, okay, well, we've been around for, a couple of years. I guess we were out of the basement. So we've been around for 3 and a bit years. And we decided, instead of going off in a corner and trying to write down what we wanted our values to be, we decided instead to basically have a day, or I think it was a morning, but we just went through and said, what do we think they are? And we had some, we asked everybody, like,
how many people were there? Was it like the full team or the leadership team, or what was that? What does that look like?
We did it as the whole company. And I think that's absolutely the right way to go ahead and do it. You have the moral authority as a founder or CEO to go ahead and shape the final articulation. But, for me, I've long believed it's not all me, right? It's other people are contributing to this and have perspectives on it. And in some cases, understand elements of it, far, far better than I do. And so what we just tried to do was kind of get the stories out there of like, hey, what were these moments of your proud? What does that make you think? What and why do you think our values are what they are? And we try to focus more on the behaviors, like, hey, we behave in this way. And then you try and, find a way to capture that behavior that you want to perpetuate. It can be in a word, it can be in a sentence, whatever it is. But that was the process. So we asked everybody, we put stuff up on a board, we kind of distilled, refined, and we wound up with what our value statements were.
And after you've done that entire full team meeting, then after that, what happens? Do you kind of go with a smaller team, really hone in on what you want to do, and then kind of make a big announcement to the company? What's the process there?
I think it's up to you, and it depends on the size and scale of the company. Effectively, that's what we did. I think, I'm sort of like to get into these kinds of details. So I think with the final wordsmithing, I was fussing around with, but but there was definitely very collaborative to get there, and that's kind of the way to get it finished, is to have one person kind of round it off, and classically that's a founder or kind of person.
Right. So, when did you? Do you start seeing benefits? Like, when do you start seeing the benefits of this, and how do you notice that it's working or it's happening?
Well, let's go ahead and say, I think it's very important to do the company ones, but we've also seen benefits. We've had a department go ahead and. Right. So our support department actually has their own, sub value set. So they got the company ones, and then they have a bunch of things that govern their behaviors. And I don't know if you know about FreshBooks, but, we're sort of, recognized, globally for customer service. So, if you're using our accounting software, please phone us and experience it for yourself. But we go ahead and compete with like Zappos and Rackspace and all these other, sort of companies that are known for their service and beat them. So it like the Stevie Awards, which is the awards for people who do this stuff. And so I mentioned that only for context. So along the way, and I guess the reason I mention this is I think any leader in an organization, you don't want to make another set of values that are cross purposes of the company. But if values are really around behaviors that you want to go ahead and see, there can be, great benefit to kind of writing your own set. And so, one of our support values that they came up with was humans, not robots. And so this is the idea that, you're not going to use a canned email without thinking to reply to somebody. You're going to write, something a little more fulsome and that's human, and, reads the email from somebody and recognizes something inside of it so that they know it's a human, not a robot. And so, that was not a company level value. Anyhow, the point is, I'm just trying to make it real for, let's say you're running a department and you want to get a certain set of behaviors happening in your department that aren't. Mm-hmm. You could take some short list of 3 to 5 behaviors you want to instill, and not work at cross purposes to the company to go ahead and do it. And so something like that, like humans not robots, is gives you a pretty clear sense of how somebody would use that in a support department to produce the outcomes that you want.
Thanks so much for that. And we're talking to Mike McDermott, CEO of FreshBooks, and he's sharing some great insights on building good cultures and growing and sustained cultures as you grow your company and scale your business. So thanks so much for spending time here today. If you were joining us, you can certainly ask questions below. We have other people joining from Houston, Texas, and some other places, but ask some questions if you have any questions about culture and things like that. My next question is now you've done the work with it, set the culture, you're starting to see some of the benefits. So now, how do you then navigate the culture as maybe there must be some shifts that happen, and then how do you kind of deal with those shifts, or is it a process you visit every year? Like what exactly do you do?
I actually think, and it's probably my bad for not doing the best job answering the question you had before. But before we go there, I'd like to take another step. For anyone who's really topic, there's kind of documenting your values and sort of codifying them and writing them down so people can see them, and then sharing them with people. But the most important part of all of it, even if you haven't written down the values that you want, is to think about the behaviors you want at your organization and how to perpetuate them. So you have to be deliberate about how you call attention to the good behaviors. And it's not so much about calling attention to the bad ones. Those you can do kind of like one-on-one behind the scenes and be like, hey, this is not in line with our values. But the ones like the value set that you want, whether you write them down or not, it is very important to shine a light on these good behaviors and recognize people who live them. And so, I think you can, any leader can do this in a variety of ways. Classically, if you have an all hands meeting or a department level meeting and you call somebody up and say, hey, when Jennifer, when you did, here was the situation and you did this, that really, pleased me because of that. Like calling attention to that and giving that recognition about the sort of behaviors you want to perpetuate is very important. And so we kick off our all hands meetings with like stories of extraordinary customer service. And, we have a program in the company where people can give what we call a values card. It's just $25 gift certificate, but to anyone at any time for living one of our values. And the idea is, what gets ingrained in the company is, hey, we're going to give each other feedback in the context of our values so that people learn them, internalize them, feel good about them. And because they're being recognized for just kind of being, ideally, just kind of being themselves in the way they do things every day. But that then becomes, sort of, it gets a bit of a snowball going in a good way for how people behave. So then the question becomes, what are some of those turning points where you get into things? And so, interesting to reflect on that. I think a couple things. So first of all, I think there are judgments and decisions you need to make along the way as a leader, where the outcome is incredibly unclear. Right. You are trying to make basically a business decision, and you do not know what the outcome will be. I actually think one of the greatest and most impactful values of having values is you can turn to your values at those times and kind of ask yourself, hey, sometimes the business decision and the values don't line up. So it's at the very least a hygiene check, right? Like, are we being as true to who we, sort of say we are in our behaviors as a company? And often those times when you're uncertain how to go, at the heart of it is something that doesn't quite feel right. Like it's not totally aligned with that value set. And so for me, it's like, I don't know if it's like what you'd want to call it, like if you're a trapeze artist and there's something that's sort of catchy, if you're trying to make the call. And invariably, when I've had incredible doubt and sometimes almost like short-term, business not as good, have erred and just said, you know what, this is kind of how our values would guide us in this situation. So that's what we're going to do. Your workforce is going to be like, okay, awesome. I believe in the values, and, they stay true and whatever it is. And I think long-term that just turns into, good business outcome in terms of like, revenue and profits and all that good stuff.
Yeah. I think that's really important too. I mean, living your values is something that, I'll often talk about even with my own company, my startup, or I even talk about it, with my wife and my kids. Are what we're doing right now, are we living our values? And in a time of uncertainty, certainly that's a fantastic foundation to leverage. So I think that's great. That's great.
Yeah, no, and good on you for referring to them. I think, some leaders and some businesses, they can be on the wall and they don't get referenced at those times. I think those are
Right.
precisely the times when the path is most uncertain to go back there.
And so was there, and so the other thing about the culture is, now that culture also, helps, I would say protect companies too. I mean, so when COVID hits, that having a strong culture also, I guess protects you from the storm. Is that a fair assessment?
I mean, it's certainly been my experience. I love to unpack what that means in your mind, but I think there is truth to that, right? I think if people opt in for more than the dollars or what have you, they're part of the mission. They like the environment and the people and the culture. It's a reason to stay. It's a reason to, invite people to join. It's a reason to want to be a part of something that's beyond kind of just having a job, right? So yeah, I think there are innumerable benefits to having a healthy and strong sort of culture.
So, with that being said, then what are some of the reasons why companies are challenged with, keep maintaining strong and building strong culture? What are they? What are the challenges they're facing, or why don't they do a good job of it?
Opinion mine. It's because they just kind of get away from whatever their values are, right? Invariably, if you look back and they lost their way, an organization just stopped, behaving as it once was, and so maybe they never documented their values, right? Or maybe they made a series of decisions that were wrong-footed. And I think companies are like, listen, no company is perfect, like no soul is perfect, right? And you're going to make a wrong step here and there. The question is, do you keep stumbling along and get worse and worse, or do you recognize and try and get back on the good path? And so I think what happens is, you have a set of values, they're on the wall, then you just focus on business. And in business, a lot of people will come in, especially new leadership. And I think this is a particularly hard thing with a values driven organization. You bring someone in who's new and they're here to do a job and they've done that job elsewhere and they think their job is just running the thing. But any really great leader, they're going to want to go ahead and internalize the cultures of the place that they're in and figure out how to perpetuate them so that they can, be most effective. And so I just think through, sort of poor succession planning, maybe you promote somebody who's, really effective, but, has no time for the values. And then they build a team of people who are just focused on results, let's say results is not the only value you have, but they become about the only value. And, it's like this, the fallacy of sort of shareholder primacy, right? Like you always have three constituents to deal with. Right. Yeah. You always have your customer, your employees, and your shareholders. And so I think you can start to, bias way too much to one of those groups and, and things go wrong. And so I'll just, anyhow, I think those are the kinds of things that get you off the path.
Yeah. And I think probably going, trying to please the shareholders, but then your clients, your team members and your clients and customers are unhappy. That can long term can be kind of difficult, and I think nowadays a lot of companies have. I mean, toxic workplaces and company cultures are certainly keeping me in business because I go in and talk about employee engagement, and I go in and talk about leadership development, and it's really bad. Like it's actually it's amazing how many companies struggle with this, and so I think it's going to shift to. I'm curious how the shift with the remote working is going to change things. I mean, because creating culture where people are working remotely is far more difficult. And I'll tell me my own personal experience. My startup EYPB is all online. Like we're virtual. We meet once a week or once every 2 weeks online, whatnot. And every once in a while, I was like, no, we have to meet in person. So we'd meet in person maybe every month or every 2 months. But I don't think it was enough, and I wanted to meet more often, but it was very difficult, I think, to maintain and build that culture. So it'll be interesting. Like, what do you think is going to happen with the shift, and how are companies going to be able to navigate culture doing with a virtual workforce?
So we've got hundreds of people who are now working remotely, and they've been doing it for like 7 months or whatever it is, and I think it'll be another 12.
Yeah, for sure.
So, Yeah, so we're going to be a different company when we come out of this thing, and just again, only for context, but we've been we participate in the Great Places to Work thing, which is like the Fortune 500, companies all do that. So we're sub 1,000 employees, and we've been the number one company in the country to work for, and top 10 for like the last 7 years. We really care about that. I care about it from a durability and sustain. Like, can you keep doing it? It's not enough to do it 1 year and then peak and bottom out. It's how do you perpetuate? And so, when I think about remote, like I find it, I'll just say as a leader, a lot of, the nuance and the intangible of leading to me is walking around the hallways, meeting people, knowing them, asking them what's going on in their stuff, and building those individual connections, but also, getting some interesting intelligence to understand, like, oh, did you see this over here? Like, we got to probably make an adjustment or whatever it is. And so I think you can go on like this for a while, and certainly companies have grown like this, but I really do think that's missing. And then on literally the team and people side, we see parts of our organization that, like if I think of salespeople, if you join a sales organization during COVID, it is just incredibly hard to get the level of training that you would, you'd get if you were in an office, listening to someone else kind of make the pitch, or, you're sitting next to them. It's like, oh, I hadn't thought about saying it that way. I get it. And you're constantly iterating and experimenting with how to, sort of do a better job, landing a message in the example of a salesperson. Well, at COVID, like maybe you get a couple hours a week of coaching, but is that it's just not the same. And so
I can tell you as a learning development specialist is that, studies show quite, in great detail that online learning is far, far less superior than the live in-person stuff for many reasons. So that's why it's going to be a challenge for training. Virtual training is fine, but it's not the same. Online learning is fine, but it's not the same. It's 10 times better to in person. And so, so everyone's going to have to adapt to that. It's going to be very difficult.
Yeah, it's an adapt. And I think we have to learn about it. I think, and this is just my bias, and I have no research around this, but I think when you have like seasoned experts, working remotely, can work really, gracefully. But I think where you want to do a lot of development, you want to train people up and these kinds of things, it's just a lot harder. And I think it'll really sort of slow and inhibit the learning curve for people earlier in their careers, and for folks later, it's just it's less of a thing. Anyhow, those are those are some of the challenges, and then just the straight up like team sort of building stuff, like going out to lunch and building the relationships. I think if I had one real concern about the remote working, it'd be another R, which is relationships.
Right.
How do you go ahead and build and foster those? And most remote organizations do at least what you did, Bobby, getting together once a month or once a quarter or twice a year or something like this. And I don't even think those things are going to be happening throughout COVID, because you got to fly people in or whatever it is. And so that to me is like, wow, like trying to build relationships. I find Zoom is like, you're a horse with blinders on. You just go from meeting to meeting. You're really not going to encounter somebody you weren't planning to encounter, and you can set up some coffee dates and what have you. But to build that sort of organizational network and sort of graph out as you should, it takes a ton of deliberate effort, and you may not get it right. So I think that's one of the things people have to change, to be very deliberative about that. Leaders need to go out and really canvas, their teams to understand, what the vibe is before you go and put a talk out there, because you're not going to bump into it in the hallways and kind of get that soft stuff. But and I do think relationships matter. So I do have a bias that people are going to want to go back to offices when they can.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to, I think so too. I think most people are going to want to go to the office, or at least not all the time, but part of the time. I think relationships do matter. One of the things that I started doing during this, in terms of dealing with the culture and even trying to support people, is I offered a weekly, CEO coaching circle. I said, look, I'm going to just go online, and my team is obviously smaller, so it's different, right? But I have like 12 people. But I said, look, I'll come online for an hour once a week. You come, let's talk whatever you want. Like you pick 2 or 3 topics of whatever you're dealing with, whatever you're struggling with. I'm gonna coach you through it, and I'm happy, and I'll even share what my own struggles are. And it was really a great, powerful discussion, because then you start to see how people are living their lives behind the scenes. They're sharing things that you didn't know about, And even in my relationship with you, like we talk a lot, but I didn't know about your three kids being under 5. Like, wow, okay. Now my empathy for you has exploded 10x because, like, wow, how do you do that? Dealing with that is so challenging. So, having those coaching circles I found to be quite helpful. I'm not really sure. Yeah, the culture piece for me is also something that while I go in and I help people, when I go to companies to help them with their culture, what I always find interesting is that now what's happening in the last 6 months is, they're cutting, a lot of companies are cutting costs. And one of the first things they're cutting is leadership and personal development stuff. And so
Yeah.
that to me is a part of a culture that I think a lot of, if you look at the 27% who love their work and the 73% who don't like their work, I mean, the leadership development, the investment in their development is a powerful piece. And when you take that away, I don't know how it's going to affect the cultures. I'm concerned it's going to get worse.
I think what you'll see, and maybe this is self-aggrandizing in ways not intended, but I think you're going to see there's just companies that recognize that investing in that is like an advantage right now, and they can go ahead and outpace and better retain and sort of be stronger because they know other people are going to be cutting. I know we're actually like, hey, we got to solve how do we do this in a remote world is a big question for us, and it's what our workforce wants. Maybe your workforce doesn't need it the same way, right? We have a relatively younger workforce that's relatively more ambitious, and so these investments not only matter to them, but sort of pay off for us over time. And then I think you'll have companies that are like, hey, that's an easy thing to go ahead and cut, and it's pretty short-sighted in my books. And so, but there are low-cost ways you can go ahead and work on it, things like mentoring programs and things like this. So it's not just about the program and the program dollars. You can find creative ways to get at it. But I think the point is, and then it's like, is it a focus area for you? Do you find ways to make sure people get it? And people probably don't. They've got that they would say is higher order problems to deal with.
And now that you've actually, and sorry, let me just say that again, we're talking to Mike McDerment, CEO of FreshBooks, about creating and growing, sustaining good cultures in your business. And we're kind of getting to the end of the interview. But one of the things I want to ask is, as now that you've established a good culture, you put the work in. Do you then, what are some of the things you identify? I mean, how do you identify? Maybe is there a gap here? Here's just one thing we need to work on. Let's try to focus on that. I mean, how do you figure that out?
Well, some of it is certainly intuition. It's the thing I care about talking to people. But the real answer is we use I don't like to call it an employee engagement survey because that's only part of what it is. But we do an annual thing we call the census, right? The FreshBooks census, and we just try to understand. It's like there's 24 structured questions and 3 open-ended questions, and we use that to set. So we have benchmarking for year on year, and so one of the things is like, hey, do you feel connected to the mission of the company, or do you feel like we're living the values? And we look for year on year dips and drops, and then we'll make those a focus area for the company for the year. And that that looks at like, hey, departments are going to do their own things to go ahead and reinforce it. And you can't do all these things all the time, but you pick one and you work on it through an annualized basis, and you get a bunch of other sort of broader feedback. And a lot of times it's like getting conscious about things, being more deliberative, and you start to see real improvements. And every time we've chosen something to work on, we've seen great improvement, and that one goes up, and then something else will kind of go down, and you're playing a game of whack-a-mole at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. But that's kind of the nature of culture.
Yeah, and I'm a big believer in having surveys and engaging our employees as long as they're willing to fill in the surveys. And it's important to actually navigate the analytics too, like taking that quantitative or qualitative data, and then also looking at the other data and analyze the data of retention and productivity and all that kind of stuff, and that type of stuff is an important factor in identifying and understanding employee engagement on a much more broader level. So I'm glad you're doing that. Now, again, I think we're coming to the end of our interview, and I do thank you for your time. If anyone here actually has questions after you've watched the replay, you can certainly, put comments below. You can tag me, you can tag Mike, and maybe one of us will be able to get to you and then answer that question. In the meantime, Mike, is there anything that you'd like to maybe share about, FreshBooks, some initiative, what you're working on, what's coming up this fall that's exciting you? Like anything you want to share about that?
Okay. Well, it's been a really exciting year for us as we've kind of gone from one offices to four and sort of starting to open new markets. And, I feel very privileged for having to get to do that. One of the other things I'm getting to do just, selfishly, I think everyone would do well to have many careers within their career. And if you work at one company, to think of yourself and your role in terms of careers inside, a company. And, I'm not saying it's always going to be, glorious, but, you're going to have to maybe gut through some periods. But, the people who've stayed with us the longest time, like let's say a decade, have all been through some point of disillusionment to get to another side, to then find, oh my gosh, I love this place. I'm so glad, and I'm going to do these things. And so anyways, that's a long-winded way of saying, one of the careers I'm working on right now is a whole bunch of new, product efforts. I'm really focused on that again now. And as a founding CEO, that's a blast. And so we're just super excited about all the stuff we're going to be delivering to people to improve our platform. And for me, getting to plan it and get the investments going for it and be a part of that is a real, again, another privilege and a real joy. So I think that for me is it, and look forward to getting that stuff out into the hands of people over time.
That's awesome. And someone just asked a question. I don't think we can do this, but the question is, how do you ensure the lowest level employee understands your culture? In my opinion, if he or she is aligned to your culture, then the culture is percolated to each level.
It's an interesting insight. Again, some of the things for us that happened by accident. I think one of the things we did, which is a little different than other organizations, is, what would in another organization be the lowest level employee, which are support people, is one of almost like, I think it'd be, false to say the highest, like they're not executives or something like that. So it'd be unrealistic to say something like that. But since everyone in the company goes and spends a month there to start, there's really, it's a far more egalitarian culture that we wind up with. And, the support, they call themselves support rock stars. They are responsible for training everybody into the culture and things like this. And so, by virtue of having that role and responsibility, they are very bought in. And other people are, really, they come day one, and I look up to you, support team, to show me the way. And so I think that's part of how we've gotten there. I'm not sure that's going to work in every organization, but at least, relative to that question, that's how we've done it.
All right, Mike, listen, thanks so much for your time today. If anyone has any questions for Mike afterwards, you can reach out to him. Please check out freshbooks.com as well and see all the great work that they're doing. And thanks for everyone for joining me for the Power Connection broadcast. We're going to be back on Wednesday speaking to Floyd Marinescu about universal basic income initiatives that he's been promoting. And Mike, enjoy the squirrels, enjoy the nature. For people, if that's not a background, that is real behind him. That is amazing.
I kept my commitment to Bobby here, but I'm on vacation, and it's nice to be out of the city for a few days. So thank you for having me, Bobby.
Okay, thanks so much, Mike. See you, everyone. Take care. I'll see you on Wednesday.